Welcome to another edition of the Sports Lunatics. Who are the Sports Lunatics? Well, we're just two regular guys who love sports history. Hi, I'm Shawn, Lavigne, Halifax, Nova Scotia,
And I'm Howie Mooney in Barrie, Ontario.
and you are watching the Sports Lunatics on YouTube, our Sports Lunatics channel, or listening to us on your favorite audio platform. Don't forget, check us out at thesportslunatics.com. Please give us a like. Tell your friends and family about our show, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Howie, we are 24 hours almost after the Toronto Maple Leafs lose yet another Game 7 to the Boston Bruins. But we know 1,000 Leaf fans, whether it's our family, our friends, or whoever across North America or even the world. But this is becoming, I don't know if it's a systemic problem. We always talk about snake bitten franchises, and we are now 57 years removed from the Maple Leafs winning their last Stanley Cup. We've recently done a bunch of different type of shows of forgotten superstars, top 10 teams, Mount Rushmores that have had similar Stanley Cup droughts. But this one, I got to be honest, this one feels a lot different and a lot longer.
This one was a roller coaster ride. You go through games 1 through 7, and you think about the lows that they went to. Game 4, they're all yelling at each other on the bench, and then Game 5, they get it all together. They don't have Austin Matthews. They put it all together and they pull out a scrappy win. Game 6, they do the same thing, and then in Game 7, you have one mistake in overtime, and I mean, people are pointing at Mitch Marner not picking up Pasternak on that overtime goal, but I mean, they had chances to win it through the game, and they didn't. I was watching it at a neighbor's place. We were in the backyard. We had a fire going. We had the screen on, and we're all commiserating at the end because it is just what it is, and it's so easy to point a finger here, point a finger there. This has been a franchise, a team that, as you said, 57 years since they won a Stanley Cup. But you think about it, when was the last time they were in the Final Four? It was 2002, the last time they were in the Final Four. And what time is it now? 2024 now. That's 22 years where they didn't win 2 rounds. And I mean, after the game was over last night, my neighbor, who's a big Leaf fan, uh, he turned off the sound on the hockey game, put on the music, and the first song he played was David Bowie's "Ch-Ch-Ch-Changes," and there'll be changes made, ch-ch-changes. But that's there has to be. I mean, who do you look at? I mean, this is a systemic uh, franchise issue that's been going on for years. And I mean, everything starts from the top. It starts from the top, and we can say this was the problem, this was the problem for me. But I know everybody wanted John Tavares when he signed with the Leafs. No, whenever it was, 6 years, 5, 6 years ago, and it was a huge signing. But paying those 4 guys up front, what they're paying them, has hamstrung the team in a cap era. They can't get a puck moving defenseman. They have Morgan Rielly, but when was the last time Morgan Rielly was really, really effective? It was when Ron Hainsey was his defense partner. And Ron Hainsey's been out of the league for how long now?
But going to what you said about the regime, and it just feels like now the Brendan Shanahan era is coming to a close. Keith Pelly, who's now looking over Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And usually when there's a new person, that means they're bringing in their own people or what have you. And if that's the case, then we could see wholesale changes right across the board. And it's funny, nobody's really mentioned Brad Trevliving, the general manager. But if Shanny goes, don't be shocked if the GM goes and the head coach for sure is gone, just based on just how you felt last night. It was very, even Sheldon Keefe in his post-game press conference saying some bizarre stuff in the third person about the lead. Like, it was bizarre. It just felt like last night was an end of a chapter of a book. And what that next chapter is going to look like, no one has a clue yet. But it's going to look different.
But nobody will be surprised if there aren't wholesale changes either.
No, and that's what I'm saying. There will be changes. We just don't know what those changes are going to be, but I think they're going to be. This team needs a shakeup. This organization needs a shakeup. That philosophy, as you said, signing, we'll call them the big four of Tavares, Nylander, Marner, and Matthews. The scary thing is, and I remember being in sports radio in Toronto when all this stuff happened, when they got the three young guys, they went through the Willie Nylander contract stuff the first time, but Austin Matthews, you just felt like, okay, they've got this unbelievable core, this young core, and we've seen other young cores win Stanley Cups. Now, sometimes it has taken a while, but they eventually get it done. And then the Tavares signing happened. And at the time, I don't know about you, but I thought it was a 50-50 mixture of fans going, what are they doing? This is the last thing we need. We need defense and we need some goaltending. And they went and they spent $11 million a season on Tavares, who's a very good player. But what kind of team success did they have in New York and Long Island? They had none. They might have made the playoffs, I think, once, and then they got blown out. So there wasn't a great track record there. And now, I wouldn't say it was a failure, but it's certainly, as I saw some commentary last night post Game 7, the first 3 or 4 years, it was like, okay, they're young. We're going to, they're going to make changes. They're going to make the right changes. Well, they haven't made the right changes. Now, just having their hearts broken. Leaf fans, I think, are just done having their hearts broken. And you just felt that after Game 7 against Boston last night.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my other laptop over here, and I see that, as I said, the last time they won 2 rounds was 2002. The last time they won a round before last year was 2004. It's like I said, all of this stuff starts at the top, and the Shanna plan, for whatever you want to say about it, it's not working. And
it worked for the first 3 or 4 years, but it hasn't worked since.
Well, they didn't win 2 rounds though.
No, but I think they put together this nucleus of young talent. That was, I think, their original goal. But they have not made the proper moves since then in terms of adding the veteran presence or leadership or whatever the hell they're trying to do. Their defensive core has been a patch job for years.
Yeah.
Other than, as you said, Morgan Riley.
Well, but what choice do they have? They have no money to spend on defense.
No, that's what I mean.
And for me personally, I'm an old school guy. I start from the net out. I don't start from the other end back, which the Leafs, that's the way they're going at it.
Yeah.
I would work from the goal, from the net to the defense, and then work on the forwards after that. I mean,
Pierre Maguire always said, to start at a franchise, you need a number 1 center, you need a top D, and you need a damn good goaltender.
Yeah.
To win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of the Stanley Cup, and I know people will say, well, Vegas didn't have that last year. Yeah, they did, because the goaltender played really well.
Well, they went goalie by committee, and they all did well. But the thing too, you look at the defense that they had, and they were all massive guys who could skate, who could move.
Yeah.
And I mean, Toronto did get that in Edmondson and in McCabe and
Benoit.
Benoit, that's the one I was trying to
Yeah.
think of. And so I think that they're doing things the right way. They looked a lot more competitive in games 5 and 6 than I'd seen them look in the playoffs in a long time. And honestly, before the playoffs started, I felt more confident about the Leafs' chances this year than I have in a long, long time. And I've got friends at work who are massive Leaf fans. They didn't have the confidence in their team that I had in their team. And I mean, I'm not a Leaf fan, but I have so many Leaf fan friends.
Yeah, but let's be honest. A lot of our Leaf fan friends set themselves up for disappointment.
Oh,
And it played out exactly the way they thought it would play out.
well, I remember in 2013 when they had that 4-1 lead halfway through the third period in game 7 and they lost 5-4. The next, I don't know, week and a half, I felt like I was the staff psychologist talking people off the ledges. Seriously, it was like how you know,
But they've never
if
recovered from that.
oh
That organization has never
the
recovered from that loss.
the fan base hasn't recovered from that loss. The
Right.
PTSD that everybody suffered from that. And I'm only half joking about the
This
PTSD
isn't a
from that.
joke. I'd lived it. I
Yeah.
was doing morning radio then. I know what it was like every day for months. And I am telling you, years later, when they suffered all those other 3-1 collapses, whether it was against Boston or Montreal or what have you, they have never, ever been able to get over it. They have never been able to put it behind them. It has haunted them now for what, 11 years?
Yeah.
It's
Oh yeah.
crazy. It is crazy.
Well, I mean, I've told you this story, and if anybody hasn't heard it before, I'll tell it again. 2021, Montreal was, I mean, they were if you put the teams from 1 through 16 in terms of standings, the playoff teams, Montreal was 18th.
Yeah.
And I mean, what chance did they have against the Leafs? They had none. They were down 3-1. Game 5 was in Toronto. Game 6 was going to be played in Montreal, and that was during COVID, and they were going to have fans in the stands for the first time. I can't remember what it was, 500 or 1,000 fans.
Yeah.
And I said to a friend at work who's a diehard Leaf fan, I said, I hope that Montreal wins game 5 tonight so that they can go back to Montreal and just play in front of people, because I know they're going to lose the series, but I want them to be able to play in front of some fans for one time. And then they won game 5. They won game 6. They won game 7. Toronto didn't even show up for game 7 in that series. They lost 3-0. And I took 2 steps into work the next day and heard F you, Mooney. And, you know, it's, I mean, it's a friend of mine that said it, so I didn't mind. But, you know, I feel bad for my friends who love this Leafs team so much and only want to see some success. It doesn't even have to be a lot of success, just some success, some fight in this team. And they showed
Well,
fight in
well,
games
when you
5, 6, or
see
7.
Howie, when you see other franchises, whether they've come into the league, within the last 30 years, just see what happened with Vegas. Hell, Seattle has made the playoffs, and you just go, like Leaf fans just are bewildered. You have Tampa Bay winning multiple cups. They're apoplectic. They just don't know how to deal with it anymore. It is, it really is. It's look, I don't think I actually appreciated what Red Sox fans, Cubs fans, Detroit Lions fans went through, because I was never a fan of their team, but to actually have those lengthy droughts of 70, 80 years or 100 years in some cases, and then finally winning it all, I can only imagine what it was like. I'm seeing it play out now because, I have family members who, were in their 20s when the Leafs won their cup in 67. And now they're like, in their 70s and like going, am I ever going to see them win in color? That's the
Yeah,
joke, but it's true. Like
yeah,
it's crazy. I never thought we'd ever be here. I
yeah.
really didn't. I thought at least with the Shannon plan, again, it just felt like at some point they would get over a hump, maybe not make, maybe not win the cup, but at least sniff a third round. And even in 2002, they weren't really expected to make a third round. Like, it was the teams that actually got to a third round, they were sort of not really that great. But for whatever reason, puck luck, or they just got hot at the right time. And matchups play a big key to that too.
Sure they do, yeah. Yeah, sure
Uh,
they do.
and I think that's part of the psychological part of this, is that, especially when they face the Bruins, that's what I said. I don't think they ever got past, that organization got past 10 years ago.
Well, how many times over the past, I don't know, decade or so have we heard the argument that they should go 1 through 8, so Toronto doesn't have to face the Bruins, every time. This year it turned out to be 1 versus 8,
Right.
2 versus 7, etc. And Toronto still couldn't get out of the first round. And I mean, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but they have to restructure this team in a more traditional fashion. But Dubas tried to do things in a different way by building from the top down. You have to build from the bottom up, and you just have to.
Oh, you mean the boy wonder or the boy blunder? Sorry, but like, yeah, yeah. Oh, trust me. Look, we talked about this every day, so it wasn't
Yeah.
like this is anything new
No.
that I'm saying. It's just, we're also seeing what's happening in Pittsburgh right now, and
Oh, yeah.
that's a whole other show down the road. But yeah, but as we said before we came on the air, this has been going on decades. This isn't just the last 10 years. I think it's hurt more in the last 10 years, especially that there seemed to be hope. Whereas in certain decades that we have grown up, there was no hope for Maple Leaf hockey to go anywhere.
I
That
was
changed in the 90s a little
Yes.
bit, right?
Yes. Yep.
And early 2000s, but then they had another era of the Brian Burke years where the 18-wheeler plummeted off that
Oh,
cliff many, many times.
oh.
you know. So yes, if I was a Leaf fan, I just shake my head and just
I
go,
think of the last 50 years, 57 years, because I was 7 years old in 1967. And I think of a couple of times when they were a really, really exciting team.
oh,
The Doug Gilmour years, the Wendell Clark years, the 93, 94 era, where they made it to the Final
yeah.
Four both times. Those were special times. And the year that Lanny McDonald scored on the Islanders and knocked them out, that was a pretty amazing time as well. And other than that, I mean, what do Leaf fans have to hang their hat on? They don't really have a lot.
But go back to that 92 or that 93, 94 run, back-to-back years. They had a nucleus where they had a really good forward core, but not outrageously, paid. They had a solid D core, 1 through 6, and they had a really good young goalie. That's what they had.
Well, I have a friend who was working for the Flames at the time that trade was made that the Leafs got Gilmour, and he said that Cliff Fletcher took Doug Risebrough's eyes out of his head and replaced them with grapes in order to make that trade. And I mean, what that I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to hear the talks between Fletcher and Risebrough as that trade was being made. I know that Gilmour had worn his welcome out with Risebrough, and Risebrough was pretty much angry at Gilmour for winning the arbitration fight that they had earlier that season. And there's the story is that Gilmour and I forget who his roommate was. They were on the road, I think in San Jose, and they were in an adjoining room, and in the room next to them was Risebrough. And I think Gilmour got up at about 7 in the morning to use the bathroom, and he could hear a voice on the other side of that door. And he got down low got down low onto the floor so he could listen through the crack under the door. And it was Risebrough saying that he's going to trade Doug Gilmour. And so Gilmour called Larry Kelly, I think, who was his agent at the time, and said, this is what I heard today. And what do we do? And Kelly told him, don't say a word. Don't say a word. They made arrangements with the Canadian national team at the time because we still had a Canadian national team in '93. And so he was going to go and work out with them until a trade was worked out. But I mean, that's kind of how it all started, and it ended up working out to be one of the most exciting times for Leaf fans in the last 30, 40 years.
Well, it changed everything
Yes.
because
Yeah.
just before that, wow, and that was the Cliff Fletcher. That's the whole thing. There have been chapters in the Leafs book where they've had these highs and lows, and for let's say 5 years, Cliff Fletcher, like it was a high, but then it came crashing down, and
Sure.
and they picked it back up, and they went back in the early 2000s, and of course, being a Senators fan, I know all too well of some of the miracles that happened because Ottawa had a much better team for most of those years, but could never beat Toronto, but then they would fall short the next round or what have you. So, and then they bring in big names. They brought in Brian Burke, who was coming off a Stanley Cup in Anaheim, and that was a epic fail. And then the Shannon plan. And like I said, it wasn't all bad. It just has not, it just feels like, and I think this is what has really scared Leaf fans, is that you've had Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and they are going to waste their primes. They are just going to waste their primes, being a first round flameout. On the flip side, I think of other guys, Ovechkin. Look, same sort of thing. It's like when he's going to win the big one. And it took him many, many years. They always had good teams. They always had playoff teams. They would win a round, but they lost a lot in the first round too. A lot of that was coaching, right? Like
Yeah.
Barry Trotz came in and changed the culture
Sure.
in Washington.
But I think of that one playoff series when Yaroslav Halak just stood on his head and Montreal beat Washington out in that,
Sure. Well, and they would fall short to Sidney Crosby,
yeah.
just like the Leafs are falling short to Boston. There are some similarities there. And I think that's what I think a lot of Leaf fans today, they're assuming Sheldon Keefe is gone. There are a lot of good coaches on the market right now that have not got jobs. I don't know why, but they have not, who have won previous Stanley Cups. And is this going to be the direction of whatever new regime comes in? So it's going to be must-see TV over the course of the next few months for sure. But yeah, like today, it's been I was getting some pleasure out of seeing the post-game analysis and Leafs Nation crumbling. But on the flip side, I'm like, I can understand where this has just got to be mind-numbing year in, year out.
My question to you, Shawnee, and if you're listening or watching and you want to weigh in on this, by all means do. How many of the core four do we see in September at training camp?
Wow, that was the big talk last night. The irony is Mitch Marner and John Tavares have no trade clauses. Now,
so do they kick in on July 1st, or are they in effect as we speak?
Well, they're going into their last contract year as of July 1st. So it's a matter of will Tavares waive, or they just, and that here's the other thing. Or do you play out the contracts, but then you get nothing for these guys? That's part of this. Everybody made it sound like, oh, this will be easy. Just trade those two. It's not that easy. I don't believe.
It's not.
Like everybody makes it sound like, oh, somebody will want to pick up John Tavares at 11 million
at his age, and
that's my point.
And at his level right now where he looked slow in these
Yeah,
playoffs. You
yeah,
know, it's not gonna be easy unless Toronto takes money back.
right. And how much? Yeah, they may have to. That's the thing. They may have to bite the bullet for one more year
Yeah.
on the contracts to help themselves down the road. So,
Well, I was talking to my uncle in Ottawa, and I mean, he wants to see certain senators go, but he doesn't think they can get rid of certain senators.
right.
And it's kind of the same way. You know, it's do they kick do they accept or take money back on a contract like Thomas Chabot in order to move him, you know, and try and shore up what they have on defense there. But I mean, it's a question that all GMs go through. But I think, as you said, Shawnee, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in Toronto over the summer.
Well, again, as a Leaf fan, you're desperate. You don't want to see this young talent. Here's the other epiphany. 4 years ago, everybody wanted to run William Nylander out of town because of his first contract. Now suddenly he's right there with Austin Matthews in terms of the two most important players on this team right now,
Yeah.
and that everybody's down on Mitch Marner. And so that'll be another thing that'll be very fascinating, because he only played 3 games, but he had 3 goals and a goal in game 7. So
This is what I always love about sports and what people see in a player early in his career is not necessarily the same player they're going to see, you know, in 3 years, in 4 years, in 10
right.
years, whatever, because players develop. Some develop fast, some develop slowly, some develop to exponentially, some only develop on a straight line. But every player from the time you first see them when they're 18, 19 years old is a different player when they're 22, 23, 24, 25.
And I think that's what scared a few people now with Mitch Marner. It's that he just doesn't have that maturity level, that he hasn't gone past that or raised the level of his game. It feels like he's taken a step backward a little bit. And then his antics in game 4 on the bench, like that, it was right there for everyone to see, so.
How difficult? I mean, we all know how difficult it is for a team like Toronto with the pressure that's on the team, how difficult it is for them to attract free agents. How hard is it for a guy like Marner, who grew up in the GTA, to play for his hometown team? You know, and I know fans out there think it's a privilege, and it is a privilege to play in the NHL. It is, it absolutely is. But how, for him to get a fresh start in a different city, how relieving would it be for him mentally, emotionally, all that stuff?
Well, that's a question that I'm sure the Maple Leaf, whoever asks him, that will be part of the conversation. It's like, maybe it's time that you go to a smaller market, and it seems to work for a lot of guys in Carolina.
Well, look at Matthew Tkachuk going from Calgary
Right?
to Florida.
Absolutely.
You know,
Trust me, it's a different mindset, and it's a different environment, that a lot of players don't want that limelight. They don't want 50 cameras in your face. They don't want, let's be honest, in the media world that we live in, the hot take are, there's not a lot of hot takes on Matthew Tkachuk in Florida as there is in Mitch Marner in Toronto
it's a
or any
big
Canadian
difference.
market, really.
It's a big difference when you have 30 microphones and cameras come into your dressing room after a game, as opposed to 2 or 1 or 3 or whatever.
It makes a big difference with a lot of guys. And so it's going to be fascinating to see. It really is. And like I said, it's, we were talking about how the Harold Ballard years were really, it's just been this, again, another great team of the 70s that were a piece or two away of taking that next step, to where the people that played the Leafs said they were a piece away from either getting to a cup final or winning a cup.
Yeah.
And Harold Ballard, was never about winning a cup.
Harold Ballard fired Roger Nielsen, fired Jim Gregory, brought in Punch Imlach, took the team back to the Stone Age. And when the first thing that Imlach said to Daryl Sittler was, "I'm in charge here, you're not." And and I mean, he insulted Sittler to the point where Sittler took the C off his jersey, and Imlach traded Lanny McDonald, or Imlach wanted to trade Sittler out of town, but Sittler had a no trade contract, or no trade clause in his contract. So he did the next best thing and traded Lanny McDonald to Colorado, and traded Sittler's best friend away.
And it was all in spite. Like
Yes,
it was all
yes.
spite. It wasn't anything to do with, would it be good for the team, or,
No.
or, or a rebuild or what have you. It was just to prove a point of who
Yeah.
was in power at the time. And it's been I don't know what kind of curse. There have been curses with other franchises and organizations. I don't know what the Leaf curse is, but there just feels like there is one in that organization.
Well, as soon as the game was over last night, I went on my phone and checked on Twitter, and it's amazing how many people were citing the curse of Harold Ballard on this Leaf team, all these years later.
Well, that's where it all started, really.
Sure.
You know, and
And what a soap opera it was for him to even get to the point where he was the king of Leafland.
absolutely. And by the way, we were talking about his documentary. If you've never seen it, it is on YouTube. If you're in Canada, CBC Gem has it. It's fantastic. It's
Yeah.
it's depressing
Yeah.
because you and I have both met a lot of former Leafs in that era, and they all say the same thing. That was echoed in that documentary about Harold Ballard and just what it was like to be a Maple Leaf. And yeah, I do laugh though. Everybody talks about hockey being the mecca in Toronto, and I just go, really? Like it just feels like that's the last place right now where it's the mecca.
The documentary is called Offside. It's the Harold Ballard story. And one of the viewpoints in there that I always found interesting was a guy who played for the Leafs and then he became part of media, and that was Jim McKenney. And his takes were, I felt, very cogent and very interesting, because he was playing for the team when Harold Ballard came in and they went right down the tubes, and it didn't matter what, because Harold Ballard didn't care. Win or lose, they were going to come in and fill the seats in Maple Leaf Gardens, and he was going to make money, 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 money.
Well, I know we're running out of time. That actually was part of the echoing this last couple of weeks. The other thing that is a big, every team has a playoff advantage they feel because of their crowd. And Toronto, just the way the business model is set up and the way it is for tickets, and it's all corporate, and just the real Leaf fans don't get a chance to actually go to a hockey game and cheer on the Maple Leafs. That was another thing that was brought up a lot in the last week or so, that
Well,
they just don't have that same environment that a lot of other teams have when it comes to playoff time, to give them that just boost of energy. It's becoming a thing now. It really is.
you and I have had the privilege of being down in the low seats at whatever the arena is called now. It used to be Air Canada Center, and now it's something else. But I mean, you and I have both sat down low there, and we've also both had the privilege of sitting in at playoff games in other places, in Montreal, in Ottawa, and the atmosphere, as you said, is completely, completely different.
Yeah. And but they're making money, and that's
Yep.
all they care about. So
Yep.
sadly, Leaf fans, you have to endure yet another year of uncertainty and complaining and ridicule and sarcasm, yada, yada, yada. And that is the perfect way to end this edition of the Sports Lunatics. I'm Shawn, Lavigne, Halifax, Nova Scotia.
And I'm Howie Mooney in Barrie, Ontario.
And thank you for watching or listening to the Sports Lunatics. Again, please like our audio platform or our video. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Sports Lunatics, and we do appreciate it. It really helps us out a lot. And please let your friends or family know who love sports and sports history, and tell them about our podcast. Howie, thanks so much. Have a great week.
You as well.
Have a great sports day, everybody.